Chapter 10. With hogs ranging in the woods like that, it was hard to know for certain when you'd found them all. But I kept a piece of ear from each pig I marked, and I carried the pieces home in my pockets and then stuck them on a sharp pointed stick which I kept hung in the corn crib. When the count reached 46 and I couldn't seem to locate any new bunches of hogs, Ma and I decided that was all the pigs the sows had raised that year. So I had left off hog hunting and started getting ready to gather corn when Bud Searcy paid us another visit. He told me about one bunch of hogs I'd missed. "They're clear back in that Bat Cave country, the yonder side of Salt Licks," he said. "Russell Simpson ran into them a couple days ago, feeding on prickly pear apples and them prickly pear flats. Says that there's 5 pigs following 3 sows wearing your mark. Couple old bar hogs ranging with him." I'd never been that far to the other side of Salt Branch before, but Pa told me about the Bat Cave. I figured I could find the place, so the next morning I set out with Old Yeller, glad for the chance to hunt hogs a while longer before setting in the pen for corn gathering. Also, if I was lucky and found the hogs early, maybe I'd have time to visit the cave and watch the bats come out. Pa had told me that was a real sight, the way the bats came out in the late afternoon, and I was sure anxious to go and see it. I always liked to see the far places and see strange sights. Like one place at Salt Branch that I'd found. There was a high, undercut cliff there and some birds building their nests against the face of it, and they were gray, sharp-winged swallows. They gathered sticky mud out of the hog wallow, and then carried it up and stuck it to the bare rocks of the cliff, shaping the mud into little bulging nests with a single hole in the center of each one. The young birds hatched out of there and stuck their heads out through the holes to get at the worms and the bugs that the grown birds brought to them. The mud nests were so thick on the face of the cliff that, from a distance, the wall looked like it was covered in honeycomb. There was another place I liked too. It was a wild, lonesome place down in a deep canyon that was bent to the shape of a horseshoe. Tall trees grew down in the canyon and leaned out over a deep hole in the clear water. In the trees nested hundreds of long-shanked herons, blue ones and white ones with black wing-tips. The herons built huge, ragged nests of sticks and trash and sat around the trees all day long, fussing and straining the tree branches with their white droppings. And beneath them, down in the clear water, yard-long catfish lay on the sandy bottom, waiting to gobble up any young birds that happened to fall out of the nests. The Bat Cave sounded like another one of those wild places that I'd love to see, and I sure hoped I could locate the hogs in time to pay it a visit while I was close by. We located the hogs in plenty of time, but before we were done with them, I didn't want to see a bat cave or anything else. Old Yeller struck the hog's trail at a water hole, and he ran the scent out into a regular forest of prickly pear. Bright red apples fringed the edges of the pear pads. In places where the hogs had fed, bits of peel and black seeds and red juice stain lay on the ground. The sight made me wonder again how a hog could be tough enough to eat prickly pear apples with their millions of little hair-like spines. I ate them myself sometimes, for pear apples are good eating. But even after I'd polished them clean by rubbing them in the sand, I generally wound up with several stickers in my mouth. But hogs didn't seem to mind the stickers. Neither did the old wild turkeys or the pack rats or the big-eared ring-tailed cats. All those creatures came to the pear flats when the apples started turning red. Old Yeller's yelling bay told me he had caught up with the hogs, and I heard their roaring rumbles and ran through the pear clumps towards the sound. They were the hogs that Russell Simpson had sent word about, and there were 5 pigs, 3 sows, and a couple bar hogs, all but the piglets wearing our mark. Their faces bristled with long pear spines they had got stuck with, reaching for apples. Red juice stain was smeared all over their snouts, and they stood backed up against a big prickly pear clump. Their anger had their bristles standing in high fierce ridges along their backbones, and they roared and popped their teeth and dared me or Old Yeller to try and catch one of the squealing piglets. I looked around for the closest tree. It stood better off more than a quarter mile. It was going to be a rough on Old Yeller trying to lead him over to it. Having to duck and dodge around in those prickly pears, he was bound to come out bristling with more pear spines than the hogs had in their face. But I couldn't see any other way to take them. So I struck off towards the tree, hollering at Old Yeller to bring him along. A deep cut bank draw ran through the pear flats between me and that huge mesquite tree I was heading for, and it was down in the bottom of that draw that the hogs stopped. They had found a place where the ford waters had undercut one of the dirt banks to form a little shallow cave. They had backed up under the bank with the piglets behind them. No amount of barking or pestering by Old Yeller could get them out. Now and then, an old bar hog would break ranks and make a quick lunge at the dog, but when Old Yeller leapt away, the hog wouldn't follow. He'd go right back to fill the gap he had left in the half circle his mates had formed in front of the cave. The hogs knew they had found a natural spot for making a fighting stand, and they didn't aim to leave it. I went back and stood on the bank above them, looking down, wondering what to do. Well, then it come to me that all I needed to do was go to work. This dirt bank would serve just as well as a tree, and there were the hogs right underneath me. They couldn't get to me from down there, not without first having to go maybe 50 yards down the draw just to find a place out. And Old Yeller, he wouldn't let them do that. It wouldn't be easy to reach beneath that undercut bank and rope a pig, but I figured it could be done. I took my rope from around my waist and shook out a loop. I moved to the lip of the cut bank, and the pigs were too far back under for me to have a good throw. Well, maybe if I lay down on my stomach, I could reach them. I did. I reached back under and picked up the first pig, slick as a whistle. I drew him out, worked him over, then I dropped him back and watched the old hog sniff his bloody wounds. The scent of his blood made them madder, and they roared louder. I lay there and waited. A second piglet moved out from the back of the cave that I couldn't quite see. He still wasn't quite far enough out, and I inched forward, leaned further down to where I could see better, and I could reach him now with my loop. I made my cast, and that's when it happened. The dirt bank broke beneath my weight. A wagon load of sand caved off and spilled down over the angry hogs, and I went with the sand. Well, I guess I screamed. I don't know. It happened too fast. All I could really remember in that heart-stopping scare I knew as I tumbled, head over heels, down amongst those killer hogs. The crumbling sand all but buried the hogs. I guess that's what saved me at the start. I remember bumping into the back of one old boar hog, and then, leaping to my feet in a smothering fog of dry dust, I jumped blindly to one side as far as I could, and I broke to run, but I was too late. A slashing tusk caught me in the calf of my right leg, and a shearing pain shot up into my body, and I screamed, and I stumbled, and went down. I screamed louder then, knowing I could never get to my feet in time to escape the rush of that angry hogs that was roaring down all upon me. It was Old Yeller who saved me. It was just like he saved little Arliss from that she-bear. He came in, roaring with rage. He flung himself between me and those killer hogs. Fangs bared, he met them head-on, slashing and snarling. He yelled with pain as the savage tusks ripped into him, and he took the awful punishment that was meant for me. But he held his ground. He gave me that 1 in 100 chance to get free, and I took it. I leapt to my feet, and in terror I ran along the banks of that dry wash, right up a slope bank, and then I took out for the forest of prickly pear. I ran till a forked stick tripped me and I fell. It seemed like that fall, or maybe it was the long prickly pear spines that stabbed me in the hip, brought me out of my scare. I sat up, still panting for breath and with the blood hammering in my ears. But I was all in my right mind now, and I yanked the spines out of my hip and then pulled up my slashed pants to look at my leg. Sight of so much blood nearly threw me into another panic. It was streaming out of the cut and clear down into my shoe. I sat and stared at it for a while, shivering. Then I got a hold of myself again. I wiped away the blood. The gash was a bad one. It was clear to the bone, I could tell it, and plenty long. But it didn't hurt much. Not yet, that is. The main hurting would start later, I guessed. After the bleeding stopped, my legs started to get stiff. I guessed I'd best hurry and tie up a place and get home as quick as I could. Once that leg started getting stiff, I just might not make it back home. I took my knife and cut a strip off the tail of my shirt and bound my leg as tight as I could. I got up to see if I could walk with the leg wrapped as tight as I had, and I could. But when I set out, it wasn't in the direction of home. It was back along the trail through the prickly pear. I don't know quite what made me do it. I didn't think to myself, Old Yeller saved my life, and I can't go off and leave him. He's bound to be dead. But it would sure look mighty shabby to go home without finding out for sure. I have to go back. Even my leg hurts, and it gives out before I can get home. I didn't think any of that. I just started walking in that direction, and I kept walking till I found him. He lay in the dry wash from where I left him to go running through the prickly pear. He had tried to follow me, but he was too hurt to keep going. He was holed up under a broad slab of red sand rock stone that had slipped off a high bank and was now propped up against a round boulder in such a way to form a bit of a cave. He had taken refuge there from the hogs. The hogs were gone now, but I could see their tracks in the sand around the rocks where they tried to get at him from behind. I'd have missed him, hidden there under that rock slab, if he hadn't whined as I walked past. I knelt beside him and coaxed him out from under the rocks. He grunted and groaned as he dragged himself towards me, and he sank back to the ground, his blood-smeared body trembling while he wiggled his stubbed tail and tried to lick my hog-cut leg. A big lump came up in my throat, and tears stung my cheeks and eyes where they started to be blinded. And here he was, trying to lick my wounds when he was bleeding from a dozen worse ones. And worst of all was his belly. It was ripped wide open, and some of his insides were bulging up through the slit. It was a horrible sight. It was so horrible that for a second I couldn't even look at it. I wanted to run off. I didn't want to stay and look at something that filled me with such numbing terror, but I didn't run off. I shut my eyes and made myself run a hand over Old Yeller's head, and the stickiness of the blood of it made my flesh crawl, but I made myself do it. Maybe I couldn't do him any good, but I wasn't going to run off and leave him to die all by himself. Well, then it come to me that he wasn't dead yet, and maybe he didn't have to die. Maybe there was something I could do to save him. Maybe if I hurried home, I could get Ma to come back and help me. Ma, she'd know what to do. Ma always knew what to do when somebody got hurt. I wiped the tears from my eyes with my shirt sleeves and made myself think what to do. I took off my shirt and tore it into strips. I used a sleeve to wipe the sand from the belly wound, and carefully I eased his entrails back into place. And then I pushed the lips of the wound together and wound strips of my shirt round Old Yeller's belly. I wound them up tight and tied the strips together so that they wouldn't work loose. All the time I worked on Old Yeller, he didn't let out a whimper. But when I shoved him back under the rock where he'd been out of the hot sun, he started whining. I guess he knew I was fixing to leave him, and he wanted to go too. He started crawling back out of his hole. I stood and studied for a while. I needed to do something to stop up that opening so Old Yeller couldn't get out. It would have to be something too big and heavy for him to shove aside. I thought of a rock, went looking for one, and what I found was even better. It was an uprooted and dead mesquite tree laying on the bank of the wash. The stump end of the mesquite was big and heavy. It was almost too much for me to drag to the loose sand. I heaved and I sweated and I started my leg to bleeding again, but I managed to get that tree stump where I'd wanted it. I slid Old Yeller back under the rock slab, and I scolded him and made him stay there till I had hauled that tree stump into place. And like I had figured, the stump just about filled the opening. Maybe a strong dog could have squeezed through the narrow opening that was left, but I didn't figure Old Yeller could. I figured he'd be safe in there till I could get back. Yeller lay back under the rock slab now, staring at me with a look in his eyes that made that choking lump come down into my throat again. It was a begging look, and Old Yeller wasn't the kind to beg. I reached in and let him lick my hand. "Yeller," I said, "I'll be back. I'm promising that I'll be back." Then I lit out for home in a limping run. His howl followed me, and it was the most mournful howl I ever did hear. End of chapter 10.